Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I'm joined by the dynamic Joe Fordyce. And Joe, the Flyers officially met the halfway mark last night, Tuesday night, with a 3-2 loss to the Maple Leafs, their second straight loss to Toronto. And the Flyers have regressed this season at the halfway mark, Joe. They have 39 points. Last season, they had 48. Of course, they got off to that start that everyone was pretty surprised by. They really had themselves in a playoff race all the way down to the final game of the season. But this year they've taken a step back, and I think we can all agree there's various factors to that. But Joe, it seemed like last night the main issue came up again, and it was goaltending. They really outplayed Toronto for large portions of the game. They outshoot them. They only give up 17 shots, but they give up 3 goals. Is that what you saw? You were in the press box with me watching the game, working last night. I think that was the thing we saw too.
Yeah, I mean, you're going along and you're watching the game, and I at one point I kind of just looked at the scoreboard and I said, I got to say, 3 goals on 16 shots just is not going to get it done. Um, and that is just about pure numbers. It's not like it was like, remember this one where he needed this save, remember that where he needed that save. It's not that. It's just the numbers. 16 shots, 3 goals. That is not going to get it done. It ends with 3 on 17, and you're just not going to win a lot of games with that kind of goaltending. You're not. I mean, it's what every five ish shots are going in. I mean, the goaltending has to be better than that to stay afloat. Um, and the simple difference is last year Carter Hart was the goaltender for the first half of the season.
Mhm.
And Sam Ersson played great as his backup. This year, obviously, Ersson, first off, I believe he would tell you that he hasn't played as well as we've seen him play. And he's been injured multiple times. I think this is 3 times now he's missed time with injuries. And the guys behind him, while they've shown spots, they've shown glimpses, it hasn't been consistent. And right now, it's consistent, but it's consistent in the wrong direction. And that I really think that that is the explanation for the difference in points. I mean, it boils down to goaltending. Um, have there been some defensive lapses? Sure. Austin Matthews cruises down the slot last night to score a goal. Sure. But in hockey, great players are going to find their way to get shots on goal. And sometimes you just need a save. And I think that's what's missing right now with the Flyers.
It's hard to argue it. It's hard to find other issues. They are not a perfect team. We know that, Joe. They are not. They have flaws. Their PK is like middle of the pack. Last year it was better. The power play, as we all know, has been an issue, ongoing issue. Do they lack some talent? Sure, but there are games where they are outplaying teams and they're winning the shot differential, the scoring chance differential, and they're just not getting the saves. And John Tortorella said it in the morning at morning skate. He said when Carter Hart left the team for the obviously because of the Hockey Canada sexual assault case, it put the Flyers goaltending situation into turmoil. And it's hard to argue that. It's been all over the place. It hasn't been stable. Samuel Ersson wore down last year. This season, he's battled injuries 3 times. They now have 2 guys with little NHL experience coming over from Russia, the KHL. And those guys, of course, are, as expected, are having some lumps and not really giving the Flyers the saves. Joe, I guess the one thing people would probably argue is could the Flyers have addressed the goaltending issue? But, I think they wanted to go with the guys in house. They didn't want to go out. I'm not sure they felt like they even had the money. I don't think they wanted to give up the assets to get a goalie. And I think they had faith that Samuel Ersson could step up and play the number one role and that they could use 2 in-house guys, guys that they had been hoping would come here, to maybe figure out the backup situation. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, and their system is stocked with goalies.
Mhm.
So you have to find out whether these guys can play. And it's again back to what we've talked about with a lot of other aspects of this team. It's the balance of competing versus spending, investing assets into getting goaltending or whatever the case may be. And I just think with where this team is, and when you hear Jonesy talk, and when you hear Danny Briere talk, when you hear Torts talk, they're all in lockstep that this is not about now. The now is almost a bonus. So with that mindset, why would you go get a goaltender? And really, I mean, who would you go get that you're sure is better than, let's say, the guy backing up Harrison? Whoever, I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about before the season. If you were going to go get a goalie, who would you go get that you're sure is better than Fedotov? And they didn't even know Kolosov was going to be here. So I don't know. I don't think that addressing it or beefing it up via free agency and or a trade was the way to go here. It's because I don't know what are you going to get. I mean, yeah, there was the guy in Nashville that caused a problem. He wanted to be guaranteed the starting spot. They, of course, have a goalie and they ended up trading him. But outside of him, I'm not sure teams are dangling their starting goaltenders out there to trade. It's
Right.
not exactly, your top end goaltenders they get traded like quarterbacks in the NFL. It doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
So, um, I think their options were severely limited, and for a team in the position they are, I don't disagree with how they handled the goaltending situation because you really coming into this season, you don't know that Sam Erson's going to get hurt. You don't know if Sam Erson's this can handle the load of a starting goaltender, and you certainly don't know about the guys behind him. Limited exposure with Fedotov, no exposure with Kolosov. I mean, and Cal Peterson is a guy with NHL experience that is a borderline NHL goaltender at this point.
Mhm.
So I don't really know what other option they would have other than the one that they went with. It's just this is part of the process, as John Tortorella likes to reference.
I don't have a ton of qualms with it either. I think it's definitely fair to argue. It's definitely fair to maybe point out that they could have handled this better, because it's not working. I mean, right now, like they're figuring some things out, maybe about guys in net, and they're going to seriously have to evaluate it in the offseason. But the Flyers have gone with that placeholder backup for so long, and they weren't really in a position where I thought they needed to be a contender this year. So if they were like a win now team, I would have said, yeah, go out to get a veteran backup that can maybe be in a tandem with Ersson and give yourself a little more security there. But I think they were in a season where they wanted to figure more things out. And two things they wanted to figure out was one, definitely Ivan Fedotov. Can he be an NHL goalie? What's he like in a full season? And then they knew that Alexei Kolosov wanted to be here. And he's a goalie that they, I think, drafted and developed and wanted to see if he could be a part of the solution here. So they had 2 guys kind of like waiting in the wings, and I really don't have a big problem with them trying to figure out who these 2 are. And listen, it's halfway through the season. The season isn't over yet. We'll see where it goes. Samuel Ersson sounds like he's pretty close to coming back from this lower body injury. And maybe Kolosov and Fedotov, we've seen flashes. Maybe they can do it a little more consistently. But yeah, I can't really beat the Flyers up a whole lot about the goaltending. It is what it is. It's a tough spot. Um, this is kind of life when you lose the number one goalie. They were tied for last in the league with in save percentage last season. This year they are dead last. And Joe, I really wonder how it affects the mental state of the team when they feel like they're going stretches of a game with really good play, outplaying teams, out shooting, kind of dictating things, and then they give up a goal, and suddenly the game's tied or they're down one after playing well. I think that has an effect too on guys in front of the goalie.
Yeah, it has to, right? It feels like if you break down defensively, if you don't do everything perfect, there's no safety net. Um, that's not a good feeling to have. It's a feeling that we've seen with this team before. Of course, when Carter Hart was injured a couple times during the last few seasons, and of course, we remember back to that season where they played 6 or 7 goaltenders. That was a just a feeling nightly. Um, was that there was no safety net. I'm not saying things are in that state right now, but they're just in a spot where you don't have confidence that they're going to get a save when they need a save. Um, look, the game-winning goal last night, Matthew Nyes, it's on a deflection, but all over the league, there are goals scored on deflections. There are saves made on goal on would-be goals on deflection. It like I said earlier, it's not about the specific shot, this deflection. It's not about that. It's needing a save to preserve a tie game, to preserve a lead, both of which happened last night. Preserve a tie game. They go up 2-1. Austin Matthews scores less than a minute later. These are things that, and John Tortorella kind of diminished how much that took the wind out of the sails, but I'm not buying that. There's no way you can give up a goal or you can score a goal to go ahead. You scored the first goal, then you give up a goal. Then you go back ahead, and you're really, really, like you said, outplaying a good team, a first place team for stretches of this game. And then you just right back in. And not only that, but it's their main guy. It's their big time guy. And look, let's be honest. I know the points don't say so. I don't feel like at any point over these last 2 games that the Matthews Marner contingent took over the game. You never felt like they were dominating the game. Um, and if not for that bounce back goal that Matthews scores, I really think you could say you did a decent job against
Mhm.
one of the top lines in the league. But again, you need a save, you need a deflection, you need a stick in the right place, you need somebody marking Matthews as he comes between the circles. Um, because I'm not sure there's anyone in the league much more dangerous. So it's a perfect storm of things, but I think the bottom line is you need a save somewhere.
Get fired up for the playoffs with an Eagles live Q&A tonight. Join Eagles experts in person or virtually as they answer all your biggest birds questions. Our live Eagles Q&A is presented by Toyota, the proud automotive partner of the NFL. Joe, that was one thing that stuck out to me too, and we talked about it in the press box. How many times can they put the Maple Leafs power play out there? Like
Mhm.
at times they do look like a young team that just commits penalties when they can't. And that's part of maybe helping your goalies that are not giving you the saves. You can't commit those penalties. And John Torrell did admit too many penalties, he said, but he also said, I'm not going to pick this thing apart. We played a good game. But they do like that. That to me was you can't keep committing those penalties. The Maple Leafs essentially scored 2 power play goals. 2 of their 3 goals were power play goals. Matthews' goal, the 2-2-1 came right as a power play expired. If the Flyers keep that game at even strength at 5 on 5, they probably win the game. So, I agree. I think goaltending is the chief issue here, but the Flyers can be better too, and they can be more disciplined, and they can have just more timely like a timely mindset of like when and when not to do certain things. And they hurt themselves with penalties. They just did not give themselves a great chance there either.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think the Owen Tippett boarding penalty was a bit of a rough call.
Agreed.
Um, but what I'll say is the perfect example is the Tyson Forrester penalty. there's a board battle going on along the wall, and as he skates away, his stick is over his shoulder and it clips Austin Matthews in the face. That's the kind of stuff where you need to be cognizant where your stick is, and when in doubt, don't have it above your shoulders,
Yeah.
especially when you're departing a scrum along the boards. I mean, it's it's just a careless penalty, and it doesn't affect the play
Mhm.
at all.
Right.
Um, and I think those are the kind of things that would drive John Tortorella crazy. Jamie Drysdale takes a couple penalties last night. You know, it's tough to win when. So look, if you look at the guys who took the penalties too. So who are you taking off the ice? You guys are taking off the ice. Owen Tippett, Tyson Forrester, who's been one of the best goal scorers on the team recently, if not the best. And then Jamie Drysdale, who is a significant part of this defensive core. And you're taking him off the ice, and he's not available for certain times, in addition to leaving them shorthanded. So I think this discipline thing is a problem for sure. Again, the Tippett one, I don't really agree with the call so much, but guys have to. There has to be an awareness, and it has to get better. I would agree.
And then came York high sticking. That's 24 seconds into the second period. I think everyone knows the beginning of periods can be momentum swings, and you give
Yeah,
it.
the beginning and ends of
Yep,
periods, and really like
yep.
stick penalties. I think stick penalties are the easiest way to kill any momentum your team has, because it's not like you're taking a penalty of a guy on a breakaway to prevent a goal. You're not doing anything that affects the team one way or another, and it's generally stick penalties come down to carelessness,
Mhm.
and it just puts your team in such a bind. And it happens multiple times last night. And again, you're not putting the 29th ranked power play out there. You're putting one of the top power plays in the league, two of the top power play players in the entire league, two of the top offensive players in the league, giving them a shot over and over and over again. It's going to come back to bite you.
No doubt the Flyers will be, and the Flyers will hope to be more disciplined when they play the Stars Thursday at home on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Joe, last question for you. I'll wrap it up with this. Halfway mark, we know where the Flyers stand. They're still right in the mix in terms of keeping things interesting in the playoff race. Can they get it together? Can they start to piece together full games where you feel like, again, maybe similar to last season, they can get to the finish line at least in the playoff race? I really think it's going to hinge largely on Samuel Ersson. If he can get healthy, stay healthy, be consistent for them, I think they have a chance to make this interesting down the stretch. I think they do have good ingredients, but really, it's going to boil down to, I think, goaltending and the consistency there in net. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it will as well. Because one, I don't think you can stay in the mix when you don't know who your goalie is night to night, and you're trying to figure out who is the who who's playing less bad.
Yeah.
Essentially, is what it's been in recent games. And the whole structure of your goaltending is just completely in flux. And listen, when John Tortorella gets asked about this goaltending situation, and it's not Sam Ersson, I think the frustration is completely evident. Last night, I have no idea what's going to happen with this goaltending situation. And he didn't just say it matter of fact, he said it like he was frustrated. And all of a sudden, in twice now in the last week and a half, we're hearing him open up about how the situation with everything that went on last year screwed over their goaltending. It's supposed to be this way. And I'm not saying screwed over. He's saying it.
Yeah.
He said screwed over. So um it's clearly a point of frustration. And I think what they're realizing right now is they have three goalies, and they don't know if they have a starting NHL goalie amongst the three.
Yeah.
And that's not a great position to be in mid-season. Um, so I think, as you said, it hinges on Sam Ersson. It hinges on these other two guys. kind of one of them establishing themselves as the backup, and finding some consistency. Um, and I think that's their shot. There's a lot of teams around the same amount of points, and you would expect that that would thin out. But what you would also expect is that the Flyers' schedule gets tougher.
Mm.
I mean, we take a look at this. They've got multiple games left with the Devils. They still play Pittsburgh again. The Rangers, of course, are struggling. I don't know that they can recover. That seems like a mess this year. But a lot of teams on that schedule, that a lot of tough teams. So it will be a challenge, and I think it hinges on Airson, like you said.
You could sense the irritation with Tortorella last night. His post-game press conference wasn't very long, pretty short, in fact. He didn't have a blow up or anything, but Joe, as you mentioned, he said, "Not sure what's going to happen with my goaltending rotation." He said, "We only gave up 10 scoring chances." And you could tell he left it right there, almost to make a point that
Yeah,
they
what
have,
he's saying is what we said.
yeah,
3 goals on 16 shots or 17 shots is
yeah,
not good enough. He's not filling in all those words, but he's saying it with a statement like that about the 10 scoring chances. We
right,
played well enough to win. That's what he's saying.
yeah,
The question you asked him, too many penalties, but I'm not going to pick this apart. We
yeah,
played a good game. What's the part that let them down? It's, I think he's letting us figure this one out
yeah,
so that he doesn't have to say it as
yep.
explicitly.
Yeah, I'll give him credit there because there have been times where he says it explicitly, whether it's with his words or his body language. And I think here he's trying not to bury his goalies. He's trying to stay positive, but also allowing us to just read between the lines of his thoughts. And I don't think you need, an expert to tell you what the Flyers are missing right now. They are missing something at the most important position. It's consistency in net, a goalie that can give them consistent starts. They're lacking experience there. It's really a perfect storm right now for them in net. And we'll see if the Flyers can find a way to figure it out here in the second half. But Joe, I think they have the talent to score some goals. I don't really worry about them a ton offensively. I think they have people on the ice that can produce offensively. I think they have a decent mix of defensemen. Uh, I think it's going to come down to goaltending. I think we both agree on that, and we will see if the Flyers can get it right in net moving forward here. But Joe, looking forward to pre and post game live on Thursday before and after the Flyers take on the Stars on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Joe Fordyce,
Yeah,
thank
and I should mention on that one on that note, it's the Ed Snyder Legacy game
you.
on Thursday at Wells Fargo Center against the Dallas Stars. We will have a special guest Dan Hilferty join us in studio during Flyers pregame live with Ashland and Scott and Al. So that should be a good night. Always great to reflect on the legacy of Mr. Snyder.
Absolutely, that will be a special night indeed. Can't wait to see Dan Hilferty and hear his thoughts on Ed Snyder and the legacy that he has left. Joe, thank you so much. Great to see you. Great to chat with you as always. A big thank you to Ben Berry, our podcast producer and guru. And Flyers fans, as always, thank you so much for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate and listen. And we cannot wait to talk to you next time.